Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we're going to be discussing Joel Berry's latest crash out, whereby he belittled the deaths of these Catholic Christians that were attacked by the Israeli Defense Forces in the Gaza Strip, and how this has united and maybe has undone a 500 plus year schism. I'm joking. I'm being a little, hyperbolic, but a lot of Catholics and Christians are, and evangelical Christians are uniting in their agreement that Joel Berry sucks. So this is an interesting story because Babylon Bee is a huge outlet and they just alienated a Catholic audience, which is a major audience that evangelical outlets cater to. So this is interesting for that reason. It's also interesting because Joel Berry's Christian Zionism is highlighted here and how it belittles when the Israeli military attacks, a cross and then people are underneath it is very fascinating. It shows the distinction between Christian Zionism and even just garden variety dispensationalism that we all know in churches around us. Like most of the time, these people aren't like gung ho for, death to anyone who looks at Israel funny. But Joel Berry is a different breed. And that was highlighted in this story. So we're going to get to that. But first, I want you to know Evangelical Dark Web is a Christian news gathering and commentary ministry. You can support our work at our Patreon like system that's linked in the description below. We also have a free newsletter. And the least you can do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, to the podcast if you are new. Before we get to that, I did want to get to Wasan Watch Company, who definitely has, gone on the Christian Zionist, I'm going to slander Christians villain arc. And he defended this as the church that Israel, quote, destroyed. So he did quotes on being destroyed, even though he posted a side image of this church got wrecked. Like, if you look at this image, this church got wrecked. And he's putting it in air quotes that this church was destroyed. I see a little damage to the facade and then damaged buildings in the background, meaning the foreground church is not damaged. This is total exaggeration on the part of Candace Owens and others should be others other known anti-Semites. By the way, church buildings in war zones get damaged or destroyed all the time. The U.S. damaged or destroyed hundreds of not thousands, probably should say, if not thousands of churches during World War II. And, 3 people lost their lives and 9 others were injured, according to the community notes here. That matches the numbers that I'm seeing elsewhere. And yeah, this is what it looks like is, the story is that it was a tank that did this, and a tank probably aimed for that cross there and missed and hit the right side of it, but it seems like the rest of the building was hit in a different strike. So this clearly looks deliberate. This angle where the cross is clearly looks like a deliberate strike against the cross, but they missed. Maybe it was a miracle of God that they missed because, supernatural events like that do happen. So this is Wasan Watch Company bearing false witness and saying that this church was not really destroyed. And then we got Joel Berry, who kind of one-ups and goes even on the attack after it has been known. So I posted I'm not going to call it a prophecy because it was just too obvious. I wouldn't say it was necessarily from God. It was just so obvious. Like, if I said that 2 plus 2 equals 4, I'm not, and, tweeted that it's not going to become prophecy just because it's true. But I did say that the Babylon Bee guys would defend Israel's actions here, and they did, because first Joel Berry said it was Hamas's fault, which is not really true. Then he said, this won't be easy for people to hear, but there are only about 200 professed Catholics still living in Gaza, and they all support Hamas. So what does that mean? Why is he saying that? He is saying that because if they support Hamas, then they're a legitimate military target. Is basically the argument here. Now, I'm going to read his next part. True Christian faith still exists in Gaza, but it's all underground. Anyone allowed by Hamas to practice openly is allowed to do so only because they aid and support the terror regime. Now, this is mostly conjecture. It is mostly conjecture. There might be some anecdotal evidence for this, but for the most part, how the Gaza Strip operates is mostly conjecture or anecdotal evidence. But far be it from me to tell people, believers there, how they should conduct themselves when given the worst hand that you could have probably been born with. I'm running a poll right now on whether you would rather be born in the Gaza Strip or North Korea. So far, North Korea is winning, and that would probably be my selection. In 2025. I don't think that would always be the case going back in North Korea's history, but I do think moving forward, yes, for sure. And certainly, probably 2006 onward, the Gaza Strip's not a good place to have been born. But anyway, uh, so far be it from me to tell Christians how they should act. I think, if it were me, I think Christians should form a paramilitary. That way, they can come to their own common defense. This is kind of a common practice in the third world where tribes have their own paramilitary units for the defense of their own tribe. And Christians should be doing this in countries like Nigeria, for instance, or Palestine. They should definitely be doing it there. But it seems like they did not do that, and thus they're left with a proverbial and literal gun pointed at their head, and the choices are fight back or get shot. And so any amount of fighting back is tacit support for Hamas. But who knows what extent this is even true. This is largely conjecture to say that these Catholics support Hamas, therefore they kind of deserved it. That's the implication here, and I think there's a very clear implication. When I say that Francisco Franco was a great guy, and people are like, oh, but he killed people. And my response is, he killed communists. And it's called reprisals. It's a thing that happens in war. If you study the American Revolution, specifically in the South, they had reprisals, on both sides, but the Americans had reprisals against those who were loyal to the British. That is just what happens. It's a fact of war. It's a reality of war. Gideon practiced reprisals against those who refused to answer the call to arms. Or actually, not call to arms, to assist his army and feed them. He practiced reprisals against them. So, all that to say is, Joel Berry is largely viewing this as reprisals against these people in the Gaza Strip who can't exactly leave, so it's not like it's their choice to be there. And again, very thin. They're dealt the worst hand possible, and you know what? Far be it from me to tell them how exactly they should operate, but to me, paramilitary, that's the way to go. But anyway, that's Joe Barry minimizing the deaths of these people. And what's very interesting, and the other Paul has a good tweet about this. Joel wants you to support the Jewish state in its killing of Christians because they may support Hamas. Let him be to you as a heathen and a tax collector. And I said, yeah, again, even if they do support Hamas, I don't think they would necessarily be in sin for doing so, to the extent that, it's purely on a military level and it's purely more of a co-belligerency. And they're not doing as the Hamas does. But, who supported Hamas but Israel when, Hamas, didn't come out of nowhere. Let's just say that. So he did that. A lot of pictures have emerged of this church. And again, these are not terrorists. There's some old dudes, and then there's some very young dudes. These are not terrorists. And what's very interesting is Mike Huckabe. Mike Huckabe is even to the right of Joel Berry on this. He's actually less Zionist than Joel Berry is on this particular issue, because he talked about a Palestinian Christian village. This is a different story, by the way. So very recently, the Israeli militias, it seems, burned a Christian village down, and then this church was attacked that killed some people. So this is Mike Huckabe, now he doesn't say that the Israeli government did it. I just want to be clear about that. He's not very firm about they did this and I demand justice. But he says Palestinian Christians in the south of Jerusalem with a lot of American citizens. So he's talking about a village that has been vandalized, including fires set at ancient church. I visited there today. Desecrating a church, mosque, or synagogue is a crime against humanity and God. Now, again, the last sentence is incorrect because only desecrating a church in that sentence is a crime against God. So the other two are not crimes against God. Let's just be clear about that because the First Amendment, or sorry, not the First Amendment, First Commandment is a thing. It does still exist and binds the hearts of Christians. So, uh, yeah, Mike Huckabee is to the right, less Christian Zionist than even Joel Berry. And that says something because Mike Huckabee, he even threatened, he had some sort of spat with the Israelis over their hostility towards evangelicals trying to get visas to visit Israel. So even Mike Huckabee, you put him there long enough and he begins to notice. Now, I can't help but look at this Pope Respecter tweet that says evangelicals finally get mad Israel after IDF attacks a Baptist church. So he's been doing like Babylon B headline parodies. And he brought like the Pizza Hut church. I don't know if you're familiar with the Pizza Hut church, where this church that looks like it was a Pizza Hut that was converted into a church has kind of become like an internet meme for evangelical architecture. Now, I kind of think that that church, you might not like it, but at the same time, I wonder if they preach a very nice gospel there. You know what I'm saying? Like the church building looks like a Pizza Hut, but inside, it's actually real, you know, salt of the earth kind of evangelicalism that built this country and made it great. So I don't know. I'm not as obsessed with aesthetics as a lot of other people, but as you can see, there is something here that I think we can agree on, and that is, yeah, Christians and their undying support for the state of Israel has had disastrous consequences on Christianity in the Middle East. In the year about 1936, this is just, again, we don't have year to year data on the religion of the area, but the area was about 16% Christian. Now it's sub 2%. And Christian Zionists will insist the church, Israel is the only country in the Middle East where the church is growing. Well, going from 1.5 to 1.8%, I'm just giving ballpark numbers here, is not very impressive, and it's you aren't at a critical mass yet. So you can say, oh, we're the only place that's growing. Well, because first of all, Christians in Syria, bad time. Christians in Lebanon, bad time, often Israeli induced. And then, yeah, apparently Jordan, there are actually a higher percentage of Christians in Jordan and, of course, Egypt than there is in Israel. But the Jordanian Christian population is actually pretty surprising, in that it's slightly higher than the Israeli Christian population, in percentage, not in sheer numbers. So, with that said, long game perspective, yes, Zionism has been a disaster for the church in the Middle East. It has been an affront to the Great Commission, taking the gospel to all four corners of the earth. Instead, we created a state that has hollowed out the gospel in the center of the earth, because Jerusalem, to some extent, is the center of the earth, metaphorically speaking, and Mount Zion is where Christ is said to return. And according to Christ, that's where he ascended. Or sorry, not Mount of Olives, I think, is where Christ went up and now is coming down. So, there is a centrality to this location. It's also, geopolitically, it is kind of in the center of the world. So the state has hollowed out Christianity in this region, and that's a bad thing because the state was once 16%, which again, minority population, but it was growing. It went up from the previous decade of when they measured it, and it probably would have continued to have risen with British colonial rule. The British mandate would have probably increased the Christian population in Palestine in the Middle East substantially over time. because that's, what colonialism did for the world. It spread the gospel, and it provided stability for the church to do that. So, with that said, Joel Berry, a lot of people are trying to defend him, say that he didn't really mean it like that. But here's the thing, I'm not going to get hyperbolic because I don't think he hates all Catholics, and I don't think he wants all Catholics to die. But he did say that those Catholics deserve to die because they weren't really Catholics anyway. They supported Hamas, and that to me is not legitimate. I do think that they were targeted, and I would say deliberately targeted, because this is not the first time a church has been targeted by the IDF. They have a history of doing this, and this is certainly not the first time that Joel Berry and company have defended indefensible actions. But this is a religion to them. So I want to end by saying Justin Peters was right about the Babylon Bee. He was ahead of the times, and great job, Justin Peters. So that's all I got to say about that for now. My name is Ray, it's the Evangelical Dark Web. Have a blessed day. Stay based. Christ is King, and we will catch you on the next one.